séance. Bienvenue à la
I call this
réunion.
meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 28 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 5th, 2026, the committee is resuming its study of the state of access to information in Canada. I would like to welcome our witness for the first hour today.
So Office, Alexander Freeland, who's the Director General of Data and Information Services, David Nielsen, who is the Executive Director, Access to Information and Privacy, Nabi Eldebs, who is the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Security and Intelligence, and Matthew Shea, who is the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Ministerial Services and Corporate Affairs. Mr. Shea, I understand you'll be delivering an opening statement. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Please start, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and honourable members of the committee. Thank you for inviting the Privy Council Office to appear before you to discuss Canada's Access to Information and Privacy System. Je m'appelle Matthew Shea et je suis secrétaire
My name is Matthew Shea and I'm the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet for Ministerial Services and Corporate Affairs at PCO.
Debs, Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet for Security and Intelligence, Alexander Freeland, Director General of Data and Information Services, and David Nielsen, the Executive Director of our Access to Information and Privacy team. At PCO, we have a dedicated and very knowledgeable team responsible for ATIP and information management functions. PCO fully appreciates the importance of providing Canadians with greater transparency. We are committed to this objective and we strive to meet our legislative timelines and ensure that government information is available to Canadians.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Shea, un appel de règlement?
Okay. The witness is reading very quickly. I'm receiving great interpretation, but I can't understand it if it's happening too quickly, so I have to be able to understand, not just hear it. And so I would like to ask the witness to read a little bit more slowly.
So you understand that?
More slowly, please.
A little bit slower, and if you need a little more time, I'll give you more time. Not too much more, but if you want to take it down a notch, please. Okay, thank you.
Comme l'a souligné le commissaire,
as highlighted by the Information Commissioner in her previous appearance, PCO's information holdings are unique and complex. Given the nature of our mandate, the records under our control are often sensitive. And my colleague Nabi is here to speak to some of the national security complexities that may apply to historical documents.
with regard to PCO's access to information performance, our active complaint inventory has been steady over the last few years, fluctuating between 200 and 250 active complaints as new ones are received and others are resolved. We are facing spikes in the volume of requests. We have also observed an increase in the size of requests, and we have almost doubled our requests over the last 5 years. Currently, over 20% of PCO's active files are 1,000 pages or more, with a total of over 2 million pages in active requests that we must review. We share the Information Commissioner's desire to resolve PCO's backlog of requests and complaints. Dealing with complaints and orders requires additional resources, which then reduces our capacity to respond to active files, leading to more complaints. We want to break this cycle. As has been noted, PCO is the custodian of a high volume of historical intelligence files, and many of our active complaints relate to these files. PCO shares the concerns of the Information Commissioner related to historical records held by PCO and is committed to working with Library and Archives Canada to transfer documents on an accelerated basis. As a first step, by December 31st, 2026, PCO will transfer its historical intelligence records dated prior to 1975 to LAC. PCO will also work to proactively release records from 1976 onward in order to match the practices of our Five Eyes countries who proactively release records after a defined period. We are also taking steps to proactively address our own ATIP challenges. As part of our duty to assist under the Access to Information Act, we work with requesters to exclude records that are not of value to them. This allows more targeted responses in a shorter period of time. Aligned with advice from the Information Commissioner, PCO makes every effort to limit consultations only to those that are necessary. Where possible, we send other departments a notification of release with a shortened deadline, allowing them to raise concerns. We are making every effort to find efficiencies and implement software improvements. As such, we are following Public Service and Procurement Canada and Treasury Board Secretary's enterprise solution for new access to information request processing software. This software is expected to reduce administrative burdens on the team, with flexibilities including faster importing of records and auto-indexing, which will allow us to better search. Finally, we have ensured that our access to information team has not been impacted by the recent expenditure review and are taking steps to reallocate additional internal resources to this team to deal with the backlog. Nous sommes fermement résolus à garantir.
We are very committed to ensuring that Canadians have access to government information, and we recognize the important role this plays in a healthy democracy. We are continuously improving to that effect.
These elements and respond to all of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. We're going to start our 6-minute rounds with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
PCO had 219 complaints and 42 orders in year 24-25. So there's a lot of people who say, I would say rightly say, that PCO did not do what the law requires. If you could just very quickly, in 30 seconds or less, tell me what is driving this problem at PCO.
I do not know that I can answer that in 30 seconds. However, I will endeavor to answer it for you. The number of complaints is driven by a number of factors, including the complexity of the files and the number of access information complaints and requests that we are getting. We are currently receiving a large number of requests, and our requests have grown dramatically over the last few years, doubling over the last few years. We have also noted the complexity of the requests and the pages requested is much longer than before. When it comes to the complaints themselves, it is worth noting that our complaints are largely amongst 3 individual requesters. 78% of our complaints are from 3 requesters, and those have grown in the last few years, whereas complaints from other requesters other than those 3 have actually dropped by 50% over the last few years.
Has PCO consistently followed the law with respect to, and without exception, with respect to access to information?
PCO's Access to Information team makes every effort to release documents in the timelines outlined in the Act and to seek extensions when required.
So that's not a yes. And you mentioned that PCO is not going to reduce in size the number of people who deal with ATIPs. But by how many people has PCO added to their to the department over the last 10 years?
We are currently in the process of reducing the department.
With respect, sir, the question is, over the last 10 years, by a percentage or total number, how much larger was PCO? How much did it grow over the 10-year period?
I do not have those numbers with me, as we're here to talk about access to information. We did not bring financial figures.
Well, you brought up staffing levels. So if you're bringing up staffing levels, as it relates to your ability or inability to appropriately manage requests to access information, I think it's reasonable for us to quantify how many people you've had at your disposal and working in that department, and what their priorities have been. We have seen requests or instruction now for the hurried deletion of things like instant messages, so Teams messages. And we've seen that some departments, they have individuals who are using encrypted messaging services like Signal or WhatsApp. And over the last few years, there have been many instances where access to information from as demanded by parliamentary committees haven't been met, including by PCO. And so this has a damaging effect on public trust. would our requests aren't for decades-old records. So these are things that could be searched digitally. We're not talking about files that are in boxes in the basement. So do you require a rethink on how you're processing this? Because to date, the process doesn't appear to be working. Even when parliamentary committees are saying we need this information. It's not that it's secret, it's just that it's not forthcoming. So should you be dealing with this, in a reverse chronological order and addressing things as they, and resolving them as they come in, instead of, I think famously having told some requesters that they won't get their the information for 95 years, which would exceed the natural life of anyone old enough to make a request?
So I'll comment on a few of the things that you raised. So in terms of resources dedicated to the access to information function, which is different than the size of the department, we have grown that team. We currently have 33 full-time equivalent employees in that team, and so that has grown, and that will continue to grow as we try to address the backlog. We are looking at how we can do things differently. We have taken steps to try to be more transparent and to be more efficient. An example of that, in the past, if someone asked a question about how much did a Prime Minister's trip cost, they might get 500 pages of accounting information that they have to make sense of. Today, we actually offer to not just give them that if they want it, but to actually give them a very comprehensive spreadsheet breaking down all of the expenses by item. So we will actually create documents if it's in the interest of transparency and efficiency and giving the requester what they would like. And if the requester is amenable to that, we find that to be a very effective approach.
What's the one tool that you don't have today that would most improve PCO's ability to comply with the commissioner's orders and to comply with information or document requests from parliamentary committees?
One of the things that I know that the Treasury Board Secretariat and others are looking at is the use of artificial intelligence. If we were to have systems that had a better ability to auto-redact or to auto-sort documents, that would help us go through. I mentioned we have 2 million documents in our active files. If we could pare that down, if we could eliminate duplication very quickly, that would certainly help our analysts to spend their time on the actual redactions to make sure that we're doing things properly and we're giving Canadians information faster.
Okay, thank you. Madame Lapointe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for responding to our questions. I move my documents around. Just one moment, please. Can you tell us how the volume and complexity of ATIP requests has changed over the past few years? And how does this increase pressure on federal institutions?
One of the things that we've observed at PCO in recent years is since the Act changed, in the past, after a certain number of hours, a requester would actually have to pay a certain amount for the request. That was eliminated in the name of transparency and approved by Parliament. Since that time, we have certainly seen requesters ask for much larger tranches of documents. So, for example, it's not uncommon for somebody to say, I want a year of emails from official X. And it's a huge number of emails that we need to process. And that can be a lot of work, not only for the person whose emails they belong to, but also for the access to information team that needs to look through it, especially at PCO, whether it's got solicitor-client privilege, cabinet confidences, national security information, personal information. And so that takes time and effort. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have seen an increase in the number of our requests in recent years. It's went up 46% in just the last 3 fiscal years alone. And so our active files are growing. At the same time, we are finding that we have a smaller number of requesters who account for a larger number of our complaints. And so we currently have 3 requesters who are absolutely using the tools that are available to them within the law, who represent 78% of our active complaints and represent about the same percentage of our orders that we're receiving are related to files for those people. And so what we find is that we are spending a disproportionate amount of our time dealing with those complaints, because there's a process that my colleagues can explain in more detail And when it comes to an order, there's another process that goes on, which again is totally understandable. But we are spending, out of those 33 full-time equivalents I mentioned, we estimate we spend about 11 of them. So about a third of our access information team is focused just on those complaints. And so that means for all other requesters, we have less capacity. And so we are doing our best to look at ways to use technology to reallocate internally to put additional resources, because we absolutely want to be providing information to requesters and to Canadians. But we are trying to kind of deal with the fact that we do have a disproportionate number of files and active work that relates to a small number of individual requesters who, again, I want to be clear, are just using the rights that they have to access information.
Okay, Madame Lapointe, just j'arrête le temps. There is a
I'm just
phone
going to
that
stop the time.
it's,
Mine.
it's impacting the sound, so if we can just sort of make sure the phones are on silent. Madame Lapointe, continuez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci. Je dois dire que
Thank you. The information that you just shared regarding the 3 requesters, and they have a right to that, of course, and that's fine, but they are causing delays in the system, if I've understood you correctly. Can you tell us who those requesters are? Is it the media asking for information? Can you tell us?
One of the beautiful parts about our access to information and privacy legislation is that we don't share that information. And so while I have data to tell me that, I don't even know the names of the requesters, and I'm very comfortable with that. And so somebody like David Nielsen to my left is aware of those names, and he actually interacts at times with those requesters as they're trying to figure out the best way to respond, but he doesn't share that information with me, and there's no reason for us to know. We do publish, I believe in our annual report, the percentage of our requests that come from media, individual, and people that wish not to identify. I think increasingly we see people don't identify, so we can't really give you accurate data on that.
OK. C'est surprenant. Excusez.
That
là,
is
c'est-
surprising. If it's for the right reasons, there shouldn't be any issues, but good to know. Can you tell us what modernization initiative for IT, for information management, have allowed you to improve efficiencies in the system, even when you're seeing an increase in requests?
So we have certainly worked to use better IAM practices at PCO. And so 10 years ago, I would not have been able to say that we were necessarily up to where we needed to be when it came to information management. We have invested in what is called GC Docs, which is the system of record within government. We have invested in the best AI tools that are currently available, but we think there's much better to come. And so we are hamstrung a little bit. One of the challenges that we deal with that we tried to overcome during the pandemic, we saw a spike in our backlog during the pandemic, because we need people physically in the office, because we have top secret documents, and our entire access to information system needs to be by design on a secure system. And so one of the investments we made during the pandemic was we actually built classified laptops that allowed employees that were working remotely to still respond to classified requests. And so this was an example of us working very closely with IT and IT security professionals and showing a little bit of risk tolerance to try to find solutions at a time that it was very difficult to do this. I think that helped us to not have a worse situation than we have today, but I will keep coming back to, we're not happy with where we are. We know we need to do more, and we are actively trying to do more.
Merci beaucoup.
15 secondes.
Ah, c'est correct.
Thank
Merci.
you. You have 15 seconds. That's fine. Mr. Thériault. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Shea, for responding to our questions. We are seeing a reduce in staffing, and according to the government's website, we're talking about 275 employees Commissioner Maynard said that the government is trying to reduce spending, but we need to remember that access to information is not a service, it is a right. It is a quasi-constitutional right based on legislation and needs to be treated as such. Access to information teams are being reduced, and that is a threat to access to information. What would you respond to such concerns that I've just shared?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I can't speak for the Government of Canada, nor can I speak for other departments, but for the Privy Council Office, we are completely in agreement with the fact that it is a right and it is something that we need to safeguard. It is the reason that during our most recent expenditure review exercise, we did not reduce in any way, shape, or form the size of our access to information team. And in fact, we are actively now trying to recruit, and we are trying to recruit from impacted employees at other departments and within our own. And so we are hoping to kind of save some jobs for people who would like to stay in the government by helping them to either retrain to work in access to information, or in the case that you mentioned, if another department is reducing their access to information team, we are happy to be the beneficiaries of hiring that person. And so our goal will actually be the opposite, which is to increase our capacity. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we are committed to transferring historical intelligence records, which make up a big part of our complaints right now, and are the types of files that the Information Commissioner highlighted.
Avez-vous un plan de...
Do you have a plan for reallocation? How many new full-time employees would you need in order to no longer have 42 orders against you in a year? Because you've been talking about your good intentions, but what is your plan realistically? How many additional resources would you need so that you wouldn't be in the situation that you find yourselves in, that is an imperfect situation?
We don't have an exact number. I think our goal is to find 4 or 5 individuals in the very near future within our access to information team. We will also look at, for those in the public service that are affected by the comprehensive expenditure review, if they choose to stay in the government, they need to have meaningful work. We are actively exploring whether some of that meaningful work could actually be responding to requests from Canadians to give us some surge capacity. In terms of what we are doing to try to reduce that, as I think I mentioned earlier, and perhaps not very articulately, we have created a bit of a tiger team that is focused just on our backlog and just on those complaints. A good chunk of those complaints relate to historical intelligence, and so our hope is that as we transfer that to Library and Archives Canada, those complaints will go away, and that will reduce it. And so the commitment that we made today to transfer to Library and Archives is directly linked to our commitment to reduce the number of complaints and to increase our transparency to Canadians.
Parfois, on a l'impression...
When we look at the performance of the different institutions, we might think that the legislation is a necessary evil. There seems to be a resistance from institutions to be proactive. They're not going above and beyond for access to information. Government agencies often wait to receive requests instead of having proactive disclosure. That should be examined in order to have good quality democracy. Responding to access to information requests is essential. And if we're not giving out reliable information, well, we can't complain about disinformation. Institutions are complaining about disinformation, but they're not proactively disclosing information and making it a priority.
A little bit of what I said earlier, that is why we are transferring information to Library and Archives more actively. I think that is part of our transparency to Canadians, because if we can transfer that out and that reduces our complaints, we can focus those resources on other active complaints and deal with the overall number of access to information files that we have. Our goal is absolutely to have more than just good intentions, but to have actions that go with it. We have been using the proactive disclosure approach where we can, whether it's transition documents, whether it's travel, hospitality, and those types of things. And we are looking at other opportunities where we can share information. The example I shared earlier about the Prime Minister's travel or cabinet planning forums, that, while not technically proactive disclosure, is us going above and beyond what is required by the Act to actually give them the information required, if it's the media to write a newspaper article, if it's somebody else to be able to kind of ask questions of government. It is about transparency, and we have certainly tried to do that.
Combien de temps? On va laisser les 10 secondes aller.
I will not use my last 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shea, would you agree that PCO currently has a real problem when it comes to abiding by the Access to Information Act and meeting legislated deadlines? Yes or no?
I would say that PCO has a real challenge in keeping up with the demand that we are receiving and makes every effort. And we are absolutely adhering to every order from the Information Commissioner.
Well, I can tell you, when I asked the Commissioner, when she appeared earlier this week, whether she had concerns about PCO's lack of compliance with the law, she answered in the affirmative. And no wonder, because when you look at the statistics in 24-25, there were 744 access to information requests at PCO, and in relation to those 744 requests, there were 219 complaints accepted by the Information Commissioner for non-compliance with the Act. That is a complaint ratio that is a staggering 30%. And presently, PCO has the dubious distinction of having the most complaints of any department across government. Why is it that the Commissioner has had to issue this year a record number of orders to comply with the Access to Information Act for PCO? Why has that been necessary?
I cannot speak for the Information Commissioner as to why she feels it necessary to issue the orders. I can speak to the numbers of orders
Could it be because there's been non-compliance with the law? Isn't that the answer, Mr. Shea?
An order does not mean non-compliance with the law.
Well, you said in your testimony, in your opening statement, that PCO is doing everything it can to meet its legislative deadlines. Well, let's look at some of the numbers and some of the cases. When the Commissioner met with the Clerk of the Privy Council, Mr. Sabia, on November 12th, in a backgrounder that she prepared following the meeting detailing what was discussed, she noted to Mr. Sabia that all of the requests that received orders to respond were in PCO's backlog for quite some time. In fact, of the 25 orders that she had issued this year, it's now at 46, by the way, so in a matter of months it's doubled, but at that time it was 25. 20 relate to delay complaints on requests received by PCO in 23 or 24. Now, the deadline is 30 days. And here we have instances where requests were not met, not over a few weeks, a few months, but in some cases up to 2 years. So how can you say, in the face of that the PCO is doing everything it can to meet its legislative deadlines? And how can you say, as you did moments ago, that you have no idea why the Commissioner would be issuing such orders in such circumstances? What is she supposed to do?
Mr. Chair, thank you for your question. I was at the meeting with the clerk and with the Information Commissioner, and it was a very productive and positive meeting. And in fact, the actions that we were taking and some of what I've spoken about today flowed directly from that conversation about where we should focus our energy. As mentioned, a large percentage of our backlog does relate to these historical intelligence documents that we have to be quite careful with, but we are making active decisions to try to transfer more to library and archives. You did reference the 46 46 orders this year. I will give you full transparency that as of today it's 47. And that 79% of those, 37 of the 47, relate to those three requesters that I mentioned earlier.
By the way, just with respect to the meeting, if it was such a productive meeting, then why is it that according to the Commissioner, when I asked her if things had gotten better since that meeting, 4 months ago, she said things had not?
Again, I'm not going to speak to someone else's opinion of PCO. I can tell you...
And my time is limited, and I'll let you finish, but tied into that, the Commissioner wrote to the clerk way back in July, and it wasn't until November that the meeting took place. So it doesn't sound like the PCO was in much of a rush to meet with the commissioner, notwithstanding the fact that she's been sounding the alarm about the deterioration with respect to access to information, with PCO being the worst offender.
May I respond, Mr.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some time to respond to that.
So I'll try to respond to most of that. Forgive me if I miss any of it. In terms of the timing of the meeting, I can't speak to exactly how long the offices took to coordinate. The clerk was just initially named in July, as I recall, and so had a number of requests, and I would imagine the offices worked together to schedule that time. I can tell you that Mr. Nielsen, who's sitting next to me, his team meets regularly with the Information Commissioner's office to go through files, to go through complaints, to try to advance these. And we work very hard to maintain strong relationships, not only with the Information Commissioner's office, but with Library and Archives Canada, with Treasury Board Secretariat, and we have made every effort to try to respond. I think the actions that we are currently taking are tied directly to the conversations that we have had with the Information Commissioner, and I believe should reduce the number of complaints. And we are hopeful, and we are serious about this.
Mr. Saini, 5 minutes.
Thank you for coming. You mentioned that you cannot name or identify people. They are looking for a most secret information under the Privacy Act. Why shouldn't they be able to recognize, or shouldn't there be legislation if people are looking for a very sensitive information, must be able to identify who they are?
The legislation actually protects the individuals. It's so we can process the requests without knowing who they are. So we treat every request fairly and without regard to the identity of the individual. So there's no bias involved because a certain individual is looking for, it could be top secret information, it could be their own personal information. It's meant to protect the requesters.
Thank you.
I would maybe just add, there is a mandatory review of the legislation that happens every 5 years, and parliamentarians get to vote on any changes to legislations. And so if any member feels that there are changes that should be added, taken away, that is the opportunity for members. We have no opinion. We want to work within the policies and the laws that exist, and whatever Parliament asks of us, we will do our best to do.
What proportion of these requests relate to historical record, and to what extent do historical files contribute to processing delays?
Historical records account for about 45% of all of our complaints, and I believe it's about 15% of all of our current access requests.
What specific challenges arise when requests involve complex files or extensive interdepartmental consultations?
So it depends on what the record is. If it's cabinet confidences, then legal services gets involved, and we have to complete a consultation to get their recommendation with respect to information that's a cabinet confidence or not. When it comes to historical intelligence files, PCO is an aggregator of information. We get information from our partners from other countries, so we have to consult partners such as GAC, CSC, CSIS, Department of National Defense, to get their input from their subject matter experts to be able to respond properly and to identify any harms that may or may not exist in the information that we're processing.
And if the other foreign countries that you're dealing with, if they don't provide you the information, then you can't pass that information to the people who are requesting it. Is that one of the reasons that caused the delays?
Some of the delays it's not because they're not giving us the information. Sometimes, like when we consult Global Affairs will consult the other countries, and sometimes they don't get a timely response. And so that causes some delays.
And is there any mechanism available to PCA to force the other nations or agencies to give us that information?
There's no mechanism to force them. However, we do escalate things, and we have discussions on an ongoing basis to try to facilitate a quicker response from institutions.
How does the PCO ensures that record of corporate values are preserved while maintaining system efficiencies.
Alex, is that a...
We have information management policies that govern everything we do. And so we have systems of record that make clear when you make a decision, you have to document it. And so earlier we heard about encrypted communications. It is required that even if you're using encrypted communications, if you make a decision, it must be documented somewhere else in the system. And so I would take the opportunity to mention it is totally appropriate to use encrypted systems. We use them at PCO because of the national security implications of some of what we do. And so it's not just, we hear about Signal, but it's BlackBerry Messenger, it's, some of our higher side technology. And so the classification of the system doesn't change the fact that we have obligations under the Access to Information Act. And so we have clear policies in place. We do training with employees. We do training with ministers' offices to make sure that people understand what needs to be kept and the types of information and how long they need to be kept. If I'm being completely transparent, if we struggle in one place, we're actually less good at deleting things than we are in keeping it. And so we have lots of old, financial or HR invoices that quite frankly we need to shred because they're over the age of where you need to keep them. That is where we struggle far more than not keeping something that we should. I think the real challenge is the fact that we actually overkeep information in government.
Monsieur Thériault pour 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le
Mr.
Président.
Thériault, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. The Privy Council Office has not been respecting ATIP requests, and there were at least 278 with delays, some delayed up to 2 years or more. And the legislation requires a response in 30 days unless an extension has been requested given the complexity of a request. So you are not an institution that is following the legislation very well. How can you justify that? Are there three or four, 5 reasons, but 3 main reasons that would explain why you're not able to respect these timelines? Next question. Experts are saying that the legislation should be amended and require public institutions to respond to ATIP requests as quickly as possible. So 30 days, and if we want to do more, require an authorization by the Information Commissioner to receive an extension of and that would be a maximum of 60 days. Is that something that you would be able to do?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So a few things in there. In terms of the comment or question about the 30 days, it's important that it's 30 days is the legislative deadline to either respond or to indicate a need for an extension. And so often we need an extension given the complexity of the files. You asked for 3 reasons that are contributing to the challenges we have. I would say off the top of my head, it is the complexity of the requests that we have and the fact that they can often intersect cabinet confidence, solicitor-client privilege, national security, and other things. And so we, as David mentioned earlier, we need to consult a large number of people. The other piece is the open-endedness of the requests that we receive. And so I mentioned earlier, somebody can ask for a year of every email from an individual. We have one requester who I think had in the same fiscal year, within a year, calendar year, 125 different requests from one person. That is something that we find to be difficult to keep up with. I will again say, throughout this, there's nothing wrong with somebody putting those requests in, but we must be honest that is one of the reasons we struggle, is that we are probably putting a disproportionate amount of our time into a smaller number of requesters, and we are doing our utmost to do more for other Canadians. I may have missed the last part about the legislation and the updates. Maybe you could just repeat the question on that part.
En fait, ce que je me pose comme question, c'est...
I've been asking myself the following question. Given the situation and given the nature of requests and how you need to respond and the challenges that you face, why are you not giving yourselves the means to respect legislation? Because it feels like there's a culture of saying, well, the request is 30 days, but the request is too complex. And you're receiving these requests every year. So why is it that you're not organizing PCO so that you can respond to these requests in a timely manner?
Thank you for your question. It is a complex situation given the huge increase in the access to information requests that we have at a time that we're actually downsizing government. As mentioned at the start, we're trying to increase the size of this team, but if our requests double, I cannot realistically increase the size of the team by 100% without putting in for an additional funding ask. And so one of
Mais
the
enfin, vous venez de dire que vous êtes
But
affecté
you
par...
just said that you're being impacted by these budgetary restraints. You're in front of a committee here that needs to make recommendations. So you can say it now that you don't have the means to meet these deadlines in the Act. Who are you trying to defend here? You need to defend the work that you are doing, and you need to ensure that you are compliant with a legislation that is a fundamental right in democracy. Say what you need to say so that we can make recommendations that are going to give you the means to meet the requirements in the Act. The Act is not a necessary evil. It is a democratic right, and it needs to be respected. You need to ask for what you need so that we can give it to you.
The Treasury Board Secretariat will be the ones responsible for undertaking a review of the Act and making recommendations. I believe this committee has previously given some feedback that should be incorporated into that. I think very high level, we will give our feedback to Treasury Board, and it's not my place to give my opinion. But I would say as we look at the Act, it is really about the outcomes. And so the outcomes that we're seeing right now...
Non, mais attention, là. Vous dites que vous allez donner votre avis au Conseil.
You're saying you're going to give some advice to Treasury Board, but you're in front of a standing committee that needs to make recommendations to the House of Commons. And the House of Commons is the one making the decision. It's not up to government. We are the ones making legislation. Mr. Thériault, I would appreciate that you respond correctly next time instead of saying that you're keeping your answers for Treasury Board.
Hardy pour 5.
Mr. Hardy, you have 5 minutes. Mr. Hardy.
OK, ça a marché. Merci d'être avec nous.
Thank you for being with us. I'll be following a similar line of questioning as my colleague. The Access to Information Commissioner came to see us this week, and she said that there has been a decline since 2018 in Canada regarding access to information. I just want to be clear for those listening, there is an office that is independent from government. That office's work is to ensure that legislation is being respected and that Canadians can trust their institutions. The Commissioner has said to us that there is a decline and that the office is not able to fulfill its mandate because they are dealing with bureaucratic issues. We've heard that $106 million of taxpayer dollars have been spent in order to fight decisions that she has rendered regarding information. She makes a request, she tells you to give that information, and then you go to court in order to go against her decision. I would like you to explain that.
So on the going to court, that $106 million is not Privy Council Office. I can count on one hand and likely less than one hand how many times we have actually disagreed and been willing to go to court with the Information Commissioner. We try very hard to deal with complaints informally. There are many complaints that ultimately are withdrawn because we work with the requester in the Information Commissioner's office. When she has orders, we do have the option to take the Information Commissioner to court. That is not something that we do. We really do want to...
Vous êtes déjà allé en cours, vous avez déjà utilisé...
Have you already been to court, or what would lead your office to not respect the order from the Commissioner? This is not something that she's doing because she wants to, but what would make it so that you would refuse to give out information that has been requested?
I think one of the few circumstances, and it has not arisen, but I think we would generally have to consider it, is if we had a national security document that our colleagues in the security and intelligence community said, absolutely, that is top secret, it cannot be released for all these reasons. If we had an order that said you must release that document, and we had security and intelligence professionals telling us that you absolutely can't for reasons of national security, I believe we would at least need to consider, in that type of circumstance, going to a court to adjudicate the issue. Thankfully, we've not had that. At the working level, we work very well with the Information Commissioner's Office, and we find ways to resolve it. Our goal is not to be part of that 106 million. We are not part of that 106 million. We are not perfect. We have issues. We want to deal with those issues, and we're not trying to deal with those issues in court.
Alors, ce qu'on a entendu récemment,
We've recently heard that the government is creating departments and that they would be seeking to remove some powers from the Information Commissioner. Were you aware of that?
I apologize, I'm not aware of what you're speaking of.
donc vous êtes d'accord qu'elle devrait
So
constamment
you believe that she should be able to keep her powers and that she should be able to ensure access to information for Canadians without losing the powers that she gained since 2018, correct?
Legislative powers, ultimately that's a decision for Parliament to make, what powers that the Information Commissioner has. Additional ones, less, that is totally not within my purview.
on avait, nous, comme information,
We had received from it as information that your department found it difficult to manage all of the requests and that you would have preferred for her to have fewer powers, but you're saying that that is not the case?
I believe I know the memo you're referring to, and that's a different department, and it's not our department. That is not something that originated with us.
40 secondes.
You have 40 seconds left. I believe that there's always some difficulties between access to information. There are a lot of requests, as you mentioned earlier, that you're overburdened. There are a lot of requesters. Do you believe that when they make requests, they don't think ahead of time to their requests? Do you believe that a lot of the requests know exactly what they're looking for, or sometimes they don't, and so you have to fight against those requests? For those who go through the commissioner, those requests were already verified, the work was done, and I imagine that a person is quite logical, and they're asking you for things that should be public. That took you 40 seconds to ask the question. Unfortunately, your time is up.
Mr. Shea.
We certainly try to do everything we can to provide the requesters what they are requesting. Just because somebody makes a complaint doesn't mean that we're not trying to give them what they're looking for. But I think the fundamental question can be, a requester can ask for something that's, a huge volume, and we will work with them. And in most cases, requesters will say, what I'm really looking for is X, Y, Z, and we will try to give them that.
Thank you.
In cases where they ask for, we want every single email from every official for the last 5 years, that becomes very difficult for us to deal with,
Thank
as
you,
you can
Mr.
likely
Shea.
appreciate.
Ms. Church, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just start by thanking PCO for being here. And I would just say, I think all of us know how much work happens at PCO. It's an acronym, but it's actually a big team of people who are contributing a lot to the public service of our country. So thank you. I think you're probably hearing from us today, and I hope my colleagues would agree, that some of the tensions that we're finding right now are really around, when this act was drafted and since it's been amended, did it envision a situation where 3 repeat requesters would take up so many resources within this team? Or how does it operate within the context of now a digital workplace where millions of records are created on an annual basis? These are difficult questions to keep up with, considering the requests that likely come in on access to information. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Shea, a little bit about your comment around the challenge of overkeeping information, because I do think that that is a challenge, and the flip side of that is the responsibility for ensuring that we are keeping careful safeguarding of sensitive and classified information. Can you speak to a little bit around the difference between transitory records and the records of business value, and maybe some of the operational risks in keeping transitory information indefinitely?
So I may turn first to my colleague to give you a little bit of a definition of that, and I may add a little bit to it.
Thank you. Yeah, transitory information is needed for a short period of time. It's sort of, for example, setting up a meeting, conversations that go back and forth. Business value is the record of the decisions and actions that departments have taken in the course of their business activities. And a subset of that information is archival value, which has value for Canadians that our colleagues at Library and Archives can speak to, which is not a huge proportion in most departments, but at PCO is a very high percentage of our information given the work we do.
Here is determining what is transitory and what is an archival record. Are there operational risks that you are seeing with keeping this transitory information? I think Mr. Shea mentioned the challenge of overkeeping information. Is that contributing to some of the challenges or the delays that we're hearing about today?
It does. It contributes volume and isn't necessarily volume that adds value for the requesters. So our challenge is to sift that away so that we can focus on the information of value to requesters. We focus on process in the department, so sort of the interactions of people as they finalize files and meetings, etc., to capture the important material. And then we provide a lot of guidance and, in some cases, some system settings to either encourage people or automatically reduce the volume of transitory information.
Could you also expand a little bit on why protecting these classes of sensitive or classified or cabinet confidence related information, how you do that in practice, how those protections would support decision making in government, the day-to-day functioning of government? Why is that important?
So I think that's a broad question in terms of all the different types, but when it comes to cabinet confidences, it really is about the ability of cabinet to have those honest discussions with a knowledge of the fact that there's cabinet solidarity and you can give your best advice. But when it comes to, like, we have commercially sensitive information that we'll have at Privy Council Office, sometimes obviously that comes down to the question of trust with the industry. If we don't properly protect that, we won't be trusted with it. Other departments deal regularly, less so us, with private information. If you show Canadians that you don't handle their private information well, I think that's a problem for the institution and not just for the department. And so we do take it very seriously to make sure that we safeguard all of those informations. But going back to your original premise, the challenge can be if we don't delete some of those, personal emails between colleagues or, a doctor's appointment or whatever it is, we still have to go through them as part of our process. And so that is of no fault of the requester. That is of no fault of any, parliamentary committee. That is our fault. We need to do a better job. And so that is not unique to PCO. We have certainly been trying to do information management training, both with exempt staff coming in, with the new government, but also with employees on a regular basis. We have seen some improvements. We have done some things, like limit the size of email boxes to try to force some type of regular kind of cleanup of those transitory emails. I do think that there's some hope when it comes to things like Microsoft Copilot that can kind of go through and say, find me all the emails from my wife, and then I can quickly look at those and say they're all transitory and let them go. So we are trying to use technology where possible. This is something we're seized with. And so, I heard Alex talking about the types of information. We are lucky to have Alex, who's a librarian by trade and has come in here with a real IM expertise and is trying to help us with this.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. We've got time for 4 minutes for Mr. Cooper and then Monsieur Sarré, je pense, après. Oui. Mr. Cooper, 4 minutes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In addition to there being real problems around failing to meet the statutory deadline set out in the Act, the Commissioner, in her meeting with the clerk, noted that there were other problems with the handling of access to information requests. For example, she noted that work that needs to be done to implement an order that she needed to issue because PCO didn't follow the law, should have and could have been done prior to a complaint being submitted. So, in other words, not only is PCO not meeting the statutory deadline, there are instances, according to the Commissioner, where the PCO is effectively sitting on access to information requests, not doing anything until a complaint arises, and then still not doing anything because it was necessary for the Commissioner to issue an order. Do you think that's acceptable, sitting on access to information requests? We're talking, after all, about what you've acknowledged correctly to be a quasi-constitutional right.
Again, by saying we have a large backlog, and so there is no question that access to information requests are taking longer than we'd like them to take. We do our best to prioritize them. One of the things that orders do is that orders force our prioritization. And so if something wasn't, the next in the queue, if there's an order given by the Information Commissioner, it becomes the next in the queue. And so that is why we have so many people focused on the orders right now.
Sitting on access requests, and I asked the Commissioner,
if I could potentially
she
finish
said
my
this
answer.
is happening frequently. And I'll let you address that. Go ahead.
So I just think we are genuinely making an effort to do this. We are genuinely trying to prioritize, but it does not mean that we are not doing the work. I do think, and I really struggle to comment on what other people have said because I don't know the context of
How about this, exaggerated claims of harm. So that's another
I'm happy to go through some of that.
Mr. Hardy asked you about going to court. Well, a requester had to go to court. He had to go to court because the PCO refused to provide the entirety of a report that the Commissioner had recommended be released, and in the end, the only issue was a matter of cost because finally the PCO relented, but only after the requester went to court, and consequently the PCO was slapped on the wrist with $4,400 in costs. So massive delays, sitting on requests, exaggerated claims of harm. Is that acceptable?
Got a minute, Mr. Shea. I'm going to give you time to respond to that.
To respond. So first, I believe when she was saying that we should have done stuff before, and I don't know the specific comment, she is referring to, from the meeting I was at, historical intelligence being transferred to Library and Archives, and she is having orders related to that. As I started my testimony by saying, we are committed to transferring that historical intelligence to Library and Archives. That has been one of the things we have been working on with Ernest since that conversation with her, and we took it quite seriously. In terms of the exaggerations of harm, I don't know what specific files that she is talking about, but we started by talking about national security.
Well, it's called Barnes in Canada being one of them.
So I apologize, I don't know the specific file that you're speaking of, but in terms of exaggerations of harm, I think there can be differences of opinions between intelligent, well-meaning people.
Okay.
When it comes to national security files,
It sounds like PCO has a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Monsieur Sarret.
Mr. Chair, order of business. This meeting has to be a respectful meeting where we ask questions in a respectful manner and give the people a reasonable chance to answer them rather than intervening every time. This is not respectful, and I object to that.
Yeah, no, it's like been conducting these meetings for almost 4 years. Members have the right to ask whatever questions they want in relation to the matter. Sometimes they take their time back, and I think Mr. Shea was given ample opportunity to answer the questions. Monsieur Sarret, vous avez 4 minutes. Allez.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses who are here with us. Thank you for the information that you've shared with us. Before I move into my questions, I would like to first start with the work that you do. I would like to educate people regarding those who work with information and those who make information requests, the Canadian public. My colleagues we're asking questions regarding what you've been doing with your system. But I would like, and of course there have been backlogs, so sometimes requests were frivolous, and there has been data that makes it very difficult to respond to an access to information request, and I would like to know how you manage both cases.
My colleagues may add to this. I think at a very high level, I heard the word frivolous. There is something in the Act that allows you to complain if something is frivolous. That is something that we, similar to going to court, it's not something we really want to do. We'd like to really, hold that for a true situation that we need to. In general, our access to information team, which honestly is a fantastic group of people who are deeply committed to this work, works with the requester to try their best to try to figure out what they're actually trying to get. The reality is, it's not unlike using AI in some cases. If you don't ask the right question, you end up getting a bunch of information that's not necessarily useful to you. And so if somebody asks a question that is incredibly broad, the first thing we do is try to talk to them about, like, if you can tell us a little bit more what you're looking to get, we'll try to help you. And I will say, not necessarily in our own interest, we will often help somebody to curtail their request to get exactly what they're looking for.
J'ai juste 4 minutes, puis le sujet est quand
Je suis
même...
désolé.
I only have 4 minutes, and I know this topic is very interesting. Earlier, you talked about priorities. And every time I hear talk about priorities, well, I know that in life we all have priorities. And so what criteria do you use to set your priorities?
Mr. Nielsen to talk about the priorities when it comes to ATIP itself and the files. I assume you're talking about prioritizing files.
So with the prioritizing of files, it's always done with the legislated deadline in mind. So the first 30 days, or if we've taken an extension on those 30 days, building on that, it always, if we receive a complaint, we try to work with the Office of the Information Commissioner to resolve that complaint, often before it comes to a finding.
How do you distinguish between these transitory documents and the valuable documents, the important documents?
Give you all the 40 seconds for that. Yeah, okay, go.
Okay, in ATIP, we don't distinguish between transitory and records of business value. We treat all the documents that are relevant to the request. So if somebody has their grocery list for some reason in their holdings and they give it to us because it's responsive to a request, we would treat that. Like it has no bearing on whether or not the information is transitory or of business value from our point of view.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Sarret. I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon and making yourself available to the committee. We're going to suspend for a couple of minutes as we switch over to the next panel.